All right, and moving on, US President Donald Trump has returned from his visit to China after 2 days of talks with President Xi Jinping. That saw both sides trade praise and tout progress in stabilizing what they agreed is the world's most important relationship. Upon his arrival in Washington, D.C., Trump hailed the fantastic trade deals and said that a lot of different problems were settled, though no major agreements were announced before he departed Beijing.
All I can say is that was a great success. I made great deals with these regulators, we have great relationships, but a lot of things didn't happen and you'll be hearing about it. But that was a tremendous success. I think it really was a historic moment. Thank you very much. What you got?
Now, the US and China have also not announced any major developments on issues like Iran and Taiwan that were discussed at the Beijing summit, despite Trump saying that he and Chinese leader Xi Jinping talked extensively about Iran during the summit. He said that Xi agreed that with him that a nuclear-armed Iran is a bad idea and that the Strait of Hormuz must be reopened. Trump went on to say that Xi offered to help find an endgame to the conflict. But the US president insisted that he did not ask Xi to put pressure on Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, suggesting that he doesn't need favors. Listen to this.
I'm not asking for any favors, because when you ask for favors, you have to do favors in return. We don't need favors. We wiped out their armed forces, essentially. We may have to do a little cleanup work because we had a little ceasefire, I guess you'd call it, but we have a blockade that's so effective.
Now, Trump has also warned Taiwan against pushing for formal independence after he discussed the Taiwan issue with his Chinese counterpart in Beijing. In a Fox News interview, Trump dismissed the notion for the island nation to go to war with China, citing US support as an excuse.
You're waiting on approving billions of dollars of weapons for Taiwan.
That's right.
Is that
I'm
moving forward?
Well, I haven't approved it yet. We're going to see what happens.
What are you looking for?
I may do it, I may not do it.
Yeah, what's your hinge point?
Well, I'm not going to say that, but I may do it, I may not do it. But we're not looking to have wars, and if you kept it the way it is, I think China's going to be okay with that. But we're not looking to have somebody say, let's go independent because the United States is backing us.
Taiwan's foreign ministry also took note of US President Donald Trump's remarks regarding the island and said that US arms sales are a security commitment explicitly set out in Taiwan Relations Act. Taiwan said that President Trump and US senior officials such as Secretary of State Marco Rubio have repeatedly reaffirmed that its long-standing and consistent policy towards Taiwan, which has not changed. Meanwhile, China has affirmed that it will continue to implement all agreements previously reached with the US and will establish councils for trade and investment. Now, earlier US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent had said that US and China were in talks to establish a bilateral board of trade and board of investment. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that the delegation of the two countries reached overall positive results, including continuing to implement all consensus reached in previous consultations, as well as agreeing to establish a trade council and an investment council. Wang Yi also confirmed that Chinese President Xi Jinping will pay a state visit to the United States in autumn this year. The Chinese Foreign Ministry confirmed that an invitation for the same was extended by US President Donald Trump. And to give us more details, our correspondent Susan Tehrani is now joining us live from New York. Susan, I just want to understand from you, how is this summit being characterized in Washington? Is it believed to be the success that President Trump is claiming to be?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when you listen to those in Washington and the Trump administration, even China hawks, they say that perhaps no news is good news when it comes to this summit and its conclusion, considering the fact that it doesn't seem like President Trump or the United States really gave anything to Beijing. And, you know, there was reciprocal, not only respect, but what we saw a lot of pageantry and friendship between the two sides, but also, at least from what Xi is saying, it appears that he seems to be a bit more open to not only doing business in the United States, but also meeting with those tech CEOs, opening the door a little bit more for American companies to do business in China as well. Time will tell. She has made promises like these regarding trade for agriculture, Boeing aircrafts, beef, and whatnot before, even as far back as the Obama administration. Some of it happened, but a lot of it has not. It's really been a one-way street, so to say, where China really does have a surplus in American markets. President Trump was hoping to change that. We'll see if there's any concrete statement and agreements from the two sides in the coming days, and I think that'll be detrimental. Regarding Taiwan, it's being viewed that the president seemed to have stood his ground. There is concern right now that the president might withhold that $14 billion military aid package to Taiwan because, as he said that the world doesn't need more wars. However, that may be viewed in Xi's eyes as the President Trump sort of giving in to Xi's demand, which, according to the White House, Xi talked extensively about Taiwan and bluntly asked President Trump to not send that military aid to Taiwan, in which the president allegedly replied that he doesn't talk about these things. He, as we saw in that interview, he's not saying it, but Marco Rubio says that policies regarding Taiwan hasn't changed. I think, while the Strait of Hormuz had made a lot of headlines, the issue of Taiwan is going to be really front and center, especially when President Trump is saying that he believes that China is set on Taiwan. He doesn't believe that China will attack Taiwan under his watch, but he warned chip companies to start doing business in the United States because he said that there are no guarantees that China would attack and ultimately invade Taiwan after he's in office. So those were interesting nuggets that came out, but nonetheless, it appears the two sides are managing this competition and sort of navigating this strategic rivalry in a world that's really unstable, to say the least.
Susan, and we understand that nobody was expecting any major breakthroughs, but rather the stabilizing of ties. And the way the summit has panned out, I mean, there are definitely signs to show that, ties are stabilizing. There was a generous display of warmth also, but now, of course, the thorny issues which still remain Taiwan, as you've just mentioned. And also there has been positive signals about the Iran war and China's intervention. But how do you think the Taiwan issue is being, perceived inside Washington? Because there were already fears that it could become, one of the contentious topics. And as we've seen the warnings that have come out from China and how President Trump has addressed those, it has more or less, added to those speculations. How is it being viewed inside Washington?
Yeah, that's the thing. Taiwan really may be the main headline coming out of this summit because the president said that because he respects Xi and he considers Xi as a friend, he said he allowed Xi to discuss Taiwan to a great extent, and he half-jokingly said that he knows more about Taiwan than anything else after that meeting. That's understandable. However, I think there's a sigh of relief, notably among China hawks and those who continue to view China as an adversary, that the president didn't outright give in to China's demands. Again, he's withholding this military aid. I think what happens with this military aid is going to be very telling on where the president stands. But he also, a few hours ago, said that Taiwan shouldn't run to gain independence, out of the blue either. He's really trying to manage that, but there's no sign that America's posture regarding Taiwan has changed. Taiwan was concerned that the United States president would go into this meeting with Xi and sort of try to make a deal regarding Taiwan in exchange for a deal regarding the Strait of Hormuz. At least from what we know publicly, that did not happen. It doesn't seem like the president has an appetite for any favors, as he said. So, we'll wait and see. I think that military package is really going to be telling on where President Trump's mind is regarding Taiwan and whether or not the Taiwanese can really breathe a sigh of relief. But of course, ideologically, America is a lot closer to Taiwan than it is to the communist regime in China.
Absolutely, Susan. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But for now, thank you so much for getting us those details. That was our correspondent, Susan Tehrani, joining us from New York.